Is it worth taking a 24-hour door-to-door road trip, you ask? There's packing and planning, getting food and water. Mom guilt, even with teenagers, are more than happy for you to leave. There's forecasting and trusting the weather. There's possibly not your best sleep once you're there, and maybe some bodily issues like a twingy back or knee. And then upon your return, there's the unpacking. Along with sharing some of the videos and photos that we took on our 24-hour trip to New Hampshire, I also wanted to share with you what gave me pause on this quick trip. Now, of course, we always know that we need to be present with these adventures that we go on. But what I find captivating are the whispers that I receive when I'm in the woods, when we're hiking or biking, or when we're on the water kayaking. My old self would likely have not stopped long enough to hear the whispers in the first place, or to believe that the whispers were any more than thoughts bouncing around in my mind. But now I believe, because at the end of the day, what harm is there in believing? So what was my lesson from this adventure? Well, there's actually a few lessons that made their way into this quick adventure. First, let me lay out the overall trip for you. We left our house for the 90-minute or so drive to North Conway, New Hampshire. This took us through a town where I grew up and a route I know well. We spent the night at a Harvest Host, which is right on the main drag at North Conway. We had dinner out, we supported the host, we grocery shopped for the next day. We were up early the next morning to secure our parking spot at the trailhead of South Moat Mountain. We had breakfast in the van, hit the trailhead just before 8 a.m. We were off the trail between noon and 12:30-ish, rinsed off in the cold Swift River before gassing up and taking the alternate route back home while stopping in a little town for lunch along their causeway, 24 hours door to door. The first lesson on South Moat was more of a sensory activation. We lucked into a cooler day than normal for this time of year, and it was just prior to that nationwide heat wave that was quickly approaching for that week. But even better was there was a wind that fed down beneath the trees, a breeze that carried away all insects. We hiked 2,000 feet of elevation gain in June with no bugs, and that changes the whole day's experience. So, first, I thanked the wind and let her know that I was listening. It is interesting, with the storms arriving this last week, the winds keep catching my attention. Winds are an activation to wake us up. The wind stirs our senses. As I write this even, the wind keeps ticking up on this 78-degree day in Maine. I stepped outside a bit ago to watch the trees and realized that actually we've had a windy few months. Some big storms have come through between last winter and this spring. The winds of change, maybe. Or is this nature waking all of us up? Listening to the wind becomes lesson 1 for this quick trip. Okay, back on track. So as we were coming down and descending down the mountain and had cleared most of the up hikers, this message came to me. And I like to think that it was a message from the wind. And I also have read that the wind brings messages from our ancestors. So that's what I like to think about. But anyway, so the message that kind of came about me was asking me to think about what was inspiring me on this hike, what I had learned or how I grew from the hike, and lastly, what gratitude I felt. Basically, not to just do the hike for the sake of doing the hike, but to think of these 3 points. And I thought, wow, this is a great practice for anyone on any of our adventures. So, as I hiked, I decided that on this day, on this hike, I was most inspired by the wind. Not only to be in nature, but to connect to it, talk to it, honor it. I grew the most on this day from the moments by myself. Tom had gone ahead, and as I lollygagged behind due to a little bit of a buggy knee going downhill, I was fully immersed in just being. And then lastly, gratitude. My gratitude on this day was in fact for Tom. He plans these outings. He creates the environment that helps me step outside of my routine. And then a follow-up question came through, and that question was, inspired to do what? And that is really a great question, isn't it? We can become inspired, but unless we do something with that inspiration, then it's kind of dying on the vine. So there needs to be a counteraction to the inspiration. So I thought about it for a few moments, and I thought, well, I can do a video on that and bring in those 3 questions, and I guess this follow-up question, and as the thread that weaves through this video. And then from a softer side, it's just realizing that the more we get out in nature and appreciate it and become inspired by it, it rejuvenates us in a lot of ways. As for breaking routine, even if it's for 24 hours, I recommend you do it. I know how fortunate I am, and I do not take that for granted by any means. But I also know that all of us have the opportunity to step outside of our normal routine to become inspired, even if that is having our lunch someplace outside. The wind is here to activate all of us in some way. We're being asked to create change in our lives, to grow, to learn, to step outside of our comfort zones. In fact, Tom and I decided to do another 24-hour trip this last weekend, and we decided to go to this ski area that's about 2 hours from our house. So we did all the same things. We packed up our stuff, we made sure we had the groceries, we loaded everything in, and we drove 2 hours there. It rained overnight. In the morning, we woke up to drizzle. We thought about the wet rocks that we might slip on. We thought about the drizzle that was coming down at that time. And we thought about the bugs. And we backed it. We decided not to go on the hike after we drove 2 hours there and spent the night in the van. So instead, we packed up our stuff and we headed out. We ended up stopping for breakfast someplace, but we still got out of our routine. We chit-chatted with each other some of the time, and other times we were left to our own thoughts or audiobook or whatever it may be. I guess the point is we just step out of our routine, and your way of stepping out of your routine is going to be maybe vastly different than the way I step out of my routine, and for each of us it could be different on a different day. It's just getting out of our norm at times to become inspired by something else. In fact, I am certain that I'll be posting adventures in the future that may be right outside my door. The wind is here too. So I encourage everybody to break your routine and become inspired. And that is it for today. So thank you as always for joining me whenever you may watch this. And as always, be well and keep stepping forward.